Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone, wherever you are joining us today. And welcome to the second session of our webinar series, China Powers, Dialogues on Ecological Civilization, Lithium-Ion Batteries, and Electromobility. These webinars are organized by our ERC project Walls of Lithium, in collaboration with the Chilean research cluster Millenium Nucleus on the impacts of China in Latin America, ICLAC. I am Cristóbal Bonelli, the principal investigator of the Walls of Lithium project, funded by the European Research Council and hosted by the University of Amsterdam. Today's webinar focuses on the role of China in the global circulation of electromobility technologies. In our previous session, we critically explored the concept and practices related to the project of building a Chinese ecological civilization. One of the basic lessons we learned is that the construction of an ecological civilization is a project in progress, in a dual sense. First, because it is an unfinished, ongoing policy program, and second, because it is a project that is after technological progress through various green development initiatives, not only within China, but on a global scale. We learned that the globe of ecological civilization, in fact, is under construction. And it is in this sense that thinking today about China's role in the global circulation of technologies will involve learning how China contributes to build and expand this circulation. What and how things actually circulate: workers, raw materials, technologies, knowledges, investments, and what things do not travel that easily. As anthropologist Anat Singh suggests, we will explore what aspects of China's scalability project successfully circulate without compromising the structure of the electromobility project, and what aspects are not scalable and face difficulties in circulation. That is why, in planning this session with Pablo and Puerto Ruiz, we questioned the suppositions underpinning value chains in the lithium-ion battery industry. We aim to understand what constitutes value and what forms the chain in these value chains. These questions are crucial for rethinking sustainability in electromobility projects. For South American countries, particularly in the Atacama Desert, from where I'm connected today, these considerations compel us to analyze the forces driving lithium extraction and incorporate China's significant role in our sustainability analysis concerned with decarbonization, technological replacements, financial markets, and territorial transformations. Pablo, hello.
I am a postdoctoral researcher at the ERC Worlds of Lithium. In recent years, China has emerged as a global leader in electric vehicle adoption, manufacturing, and innovation. From ambitious government policies to cutting-edge technological advancements, China's influence on the electrification of transportation cannot be overstated. Today, we're here to delve deeper into the dynamics driving this transformation and explore the implications it holds for the goal of emissions reduction. Chinese companies have rapidly become important players in the automobility space thanks to their focus on electric vehicles. China is simultaneously the world's largest market for electric vehicles and the main producer of this technology. The country's significant investments in research, development, and infrastructure have accelerated the adoption of advancement of electric vehicles and related technologies. An important part of this story has been the consolidation of robust supply chains for critical battery materials, such as lithium, nickel, and rare earth minerals, which, coupled with its dominant manufacturing capabilities and public-private coordination, has cemented its influence in the global electromobility sector. In this sense, the expansion of electromobility in China has triggered transformations well beyond its borders, all the way from the salt flats in South America, where Cristobal is connected today, to re-emerging industrial areas across Eastern Europe. These transformations are part of capital and material flows that are redefining the dynamic of the global economy while also reshaping geopolitical tensions, which, from an analytical perspective, require diverse approaches and scales to grasp its complexities. And that's what we have tried to do by bringing together the expertise of our panelists. Throughout today's session, we'll be trying to think about China in the global circulation of electromobility technologies through two key questions. First, how and which actors produce the global circulation of lithium-ion batteries for electromobility? And second, as Cristobal already mentioned, what is value and what is chain in the lithium-ion battery value chain? We have invited scholars who have been looking at these issues across different regions, and we're very grateful to count with their expertise from different academic disciplines and approaches. Dr. Juliana González Jáuregui, Dr. Agnes SZUNOMÁR, and Dr. Conghui Wen. Each one of our speakers will have 15 minutes to present. After the three presentations, we will have around 35 minutes for Q&A. You will be able to send your questions via the Q&A function in Zoom or by commenting through our streaming platform on YouTube. This conversation will be recorded and stored on our YouTube channel and website, worldsoflithium.eu, for scientific dissemination. So without further ado, let me introduce our first speaker for today. Dr. Juliana González Jáuregui is assistant researcher at Argentina's CONICET, principal researcher at FLACSO-Argentina, and adjunct researcher at the Millenium Nucleus on the impacts of China in Latin America and the Caribbean, ECLAC. Her research focuses on China's economic and financial engagement with countries in Latin America, particularly Argentina. Juliana's recent publications address Chinese investments and loans in Argentinian sectors related to energy transitions, such as renewable energies and lithium mining. Please, Juliana, the cyber floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Pablo, and thank you, Cristobal, for inviting me to participate in this amazing event. And thank you, Agnes and Haiwen, for being my partners today. So I'm going to share my screen so you can see my presentation for today. Hope you can see it. Okay, so as Pablo mentioned, I'm going to present today on Chinese investments in Argentine lithium sector. And I just wanted to begin with some thoughts regarding China's presence in the world, like China economic modernization strategy, which is having like multiple consequences for developing countries. During the last 5 years, China has started to recalibrate its outward investments and financing, focusing more on projects related to innovation. This is consistent with China's emphasis on its economic upgrading and the seek for global competitiveness and leadership in sectors such as information and communications technology and, of course, renewable energies. So as part of this, China's interest has included the acquisition of key transition materials. One of them, of course, is lithium, as well as providing investments and loans in sectors related to renewable energy and also the electric vehicle supply chains. So China is on a one way, like it's a global leader in solar, wind, hydropower, and geothermal power generation. And also regarding lithium, it is one of the world's largest consumers, and it's a central actor in the refining stage and manufacturing technologies for renewable energy and electromobility. In terms of its upstream positioning in the value chains, the companies like Ganfeng Lithium and Tianqi Lithium, among others, are among the top 7 lithium producers globally, And regarding China's leadership, there are like a lot of, or a wide range of companies that control approximately 60% of the refining process, 70% of the production of the batteries in the world, and 60% of the elaboration of battery components. So China's leadership in the different stages of lithium processing and production of electric vehicles explains, of course, a growing interest in increasing the presence in developing countries, but in the case, particularly in the case of the countries that compose the lithium triangle, I'm talking about not only Argentina, but also Chile and of course Bolivia. In the case of Bolivia, for example, there are two agreements between the Bolivian company Yacimientos de Litio Bolivianos and the Chinese consortium CVC. One was last year and the other one at the beginning of 2024. So this is something just to consider what we are talking about in terms of the lithium triangle. It is now home of the 53% of the world's lithium resources and the 46% of certified global reserves. Certified global reserves are those resources that have been proven economically and technically viable for exploitation. That is why Chile has no number there. We just know that it has a lot of reserves, but they haven't been industrially exploited until today already. So at the global level, of course, Australia is the top producer, 47% of lithium production in the world, followed by Chile, 30% with 30%, China with almost 15%, and Argentina almost 5%. And if we want to focus, like particularly in the case of Argentina, that's why I'm here today. As you can see in the graphics, Argentina has become, I mean, the interest of China, but also the other two Asians that I name as the battery triangle countries. I mean, Japan and also South Korea are acquiring Argentine lithium as a main. I mean, these countries have become like the main destinations of Argentine lithium in the last maybe almost 5 or 6 years. But China has become the main destination, followed by Japan and South Korea and the United States. As you can see in the graphics, in 2022, lithium carbonate accounted for 90% of Argentina's total exports of mineral to China, equivalent to approximately $289 million. And in this case, the provinces that are now producing lithium in Argentina, which are Catamarca, Jujuy, and Salta, are accounting for almost like the total of these exports, around 99.4% of Argentina's lithium exports to China. I mean, I just wanted to mention that these are the provinces where of course, the projects that I will mention later are located. So, as I mentioned before, China has become the main destination in 2021, 2022, and 2023. I mean, for the last 4 years or maybe 3 years where we have like data available, China has become the main destination of Argentinian lithium exports to the world, followed by the Japan and South Korea and the United States, like changing places during the last 3 years. Nowadays, Argentina has 3, and maybe in June it's gonna be 4, but until now, Argentina has 3 lithium plants in operation. One of them is in charge of the new Irish Arcadium lithium. The other one is in charge of Arcadium Lithium, the Japanese Toyota, and a local company. And the third one that opened last year is part of a consortium composed by the Chinese Canfen Lithium and also the Canadian Lithium Americas and GEMSE, that is a provincial company in Argentina. According to the last reports that the Secretariat of Mining in Argentina, last year report, by 2030, Argentina's annual production could exceed more than 225,000 tons of lithium carbonate and increase exports to 8.7 billion annually. So between 20 and 23, mergers and acquisitions announcements by Chinese companies total approximately 1 billion dollars, more than almost 1.8 billion dollars, representing like almost 22% of total announcements. So as you can see, lithium has attracted the most Chinese investments in Argentina's mining sector over the last 5 years. And as you can see, this is also reflected in Argentina's lithium exports to the world, with China being having become the main destination in the last 3 years. And these are some of the characteristics, the main characteristics of futures of Chinese investments in Argentina. And this is something that I think it's like really important to mention. Most of the lithium projects involving Chinese companies are in advanced stages of development. What I mean with this is that with the resources already identified and proven feasible for being extracted, and with the project's construction permits already approved and construction already started. In 2022, in fact, the total investment budget for lithium exploration in Argentina was $93.5 million, and this budget was represented by Australia, Canada, the United Kingdom, and China, with China occupying or being like in the last place in these 4 countries. What do I mean with this is China's place in this budget, that is exploration budget, shows that Chinese companies, at least for now, invest mostly in advanced projects, not in the exploration phase, but mostly in projects that are under feasibility phase or under construction phase. Chinese investors seek to control the lithium carbonate that will be produced by Argentinian plants and will be exported to China and used in the manufacturing and other related projects to lithium batteries. And the interest of China in acquiring lithium has been reflected in the recent investments and destination of Argentina's lithium exports, as we saw in the graphics before. So since 2018, but mainly 2021, China has progressively advanced toward becoming the main destination, and this is also related to the Chinese companies that are participating in different projects in Argentina. One of them that is already operating in Argentina. Chinese investments respond exclusively to mergers and acquisitions, so brownfield operations. In some cases, they start acquiring like a small participation, but then progressively take control, or more commonly, like the majority of the total of the projects, achieving like an almost exclusive presence in the salt floats. As of April of 2024, Argentina has 3 lithium projects in production, as I mentioned, and 47 projects in different stages of progress. And Chinese companies are participating or are involved in at least 14 of these total 50 projects. In general, large operators like the Chinese Canfen Lithium or other large operators like the Australian firm Rio Tinto try not to have neighbors what do I mean with this? Is that they minimize the risk of sharing the salt flood with another company. So in Argentina, there are only two cases with projects with no neighbors. That is where a company has exclusive participation in the salt floods by controlling one or more projects. This is the case of Mariana, the project Mariana in Salta province, and the project of Tres Quebradas, which is located in Catamarca. Both of them, Mariana is controlled by CANFEN, and Tres Quebradas is controlled by SZUNOMÁR. I know I need to start summing up, but I just wanted to show you these are like the most advanced projects where Chinese companies have invested. As you can see, Mariana is controlled by CANFEN and is under construction. Tres Quebradas is controlled by SZUNOMÁR, also 100% under construction. Centenario Ratones is going to, or is expected to be opened next month, and is controlled by Eramet, a French company, but is also, we have like almost 50% of participation from Tsingshan. And then you have other projects in the feasibility phase, that is like the phase before under construction phase. And then you have also projects controlled by CANFEN, and then by Tibet Summit Resources, and also Pastos Grandes, which is also controlled in a minimum percentage, but we are expecting CANFEN to become more important in this last project that is Pastos Grandes. These are some reflections regarding the possibility of Argentina and the possibilities that, despite Argentina has attempted to advance toward lithium industrialization, there are like a lot of restrictions. There are domestic restrictions, but also global restrictions, where I will try to mention in my next slide. But what I want to say is that there are agreements and meetings detailed in this table that reflect the intention to encourage lithium pre-industrialization in Argentina in partnership with Chinese companies. But however, it remains to be seen the extent to which they will include local content or technology transfers regulations requiring Chinese firms to allow access to their know-how, or permitting the utilization of Argentine scientific and technological capabilities. Up to now, these are just agreements and meetings that have been developed, but we haven't seen like further advances on this. So just to sum up, there are some domestic restrictions in Argentina's side regarding the possibilities of adding value to lithium. One of them is the Argentina's framework, the regulations. Other restrictions are related to the lack of certain technical capacities. We can go further on the Q&A on this. Also, the absence of other critical minerals, just cobalt, manganese, or nickel, and also weak linkages between the private sector and the R&D system. And also there are, of course, global restrictions, because the production of the more addition of value to lithium is located in the battery triangle countries. I mean, South Korea, Japan, and China, of course, and also more recently in the US and recently in Europe. So the creation and use of patents, of course, is controlled by the industry leaders, and Argentina is like really far from this attempt. Some of the challenges that I see in the future of Argentina's and China's partnerships is that although there are relations, or Chinese companies have been like really smart in constructing multi-level relations with national and also provincial governments, Argentina local governments have been like really big promoters of Chinese companies' presence in Argentina. But also we have, the country has the absence of a long-term vision, how to promote sustainable development, how to add more value to be located in the country, and also there are a lot of challenges regarding the governance that promotes local industries to advance energy transition, but also regarding the environmental and social governance system. Thank you very much, and I'm sorry if I took more time that I was expected to.
Thank you very much, Juliana. That was a very, very informative presentation that brought us to the upstream of lithium-ion batteries. Certainly, there are a lot of questions already being raised, at least in my head, because this is such a fundamental part of the whole project of electromobility, and there are so many connections happening in these areas, in the mountains of Argentina, but also Chile and Bolivia, as you mentioned. We would like to remind the audience that you can already send your questions through the chat function on Zoom or as a comment in the streaming that we're doing via YouTube as well. Now let's follow the stream of lithium into the batteries to a different region, the Visegrad countries of Eastern Europe, by listening to Dr. Agnes SZUNOMÁR. She's associate professor and head of the Institute of Global Studies at Corvinus University of Budapest. She has studied emerging market multinationals' activities, the development of East Asian countries, and China's economic footprint in Europe. She's also a senior research fellow at the Institute of World Economics, Center for Economic and Regional Studies, Hungary, where her research centers on China's foreign economic policy, including the relation between China and Central and Eastern Europe. Agnes is a member of the European Cost Action China in Europe Research Network, where she is the head of the working group on strategic sectors and infrastructure developments. Please, Agnes, it's a pleasure to have you here. The cyber floor is yours.
Thanks a lot for having me, and let me just share my presentation, and hopefully it's on, it works, and I also try to keep the time limit. So my presentation is focusing on Chinese electric vehicle battery investments in the Visegrad 4. Those of you who are not aware of those 4 countries, this V4, because I'm going to use this abbreviation, consists of the former Czechoslovakia, which is now Czechia and Slovakia, Poland and Hungary. So these 4 countries form the Visegrad 4. They had a very similar development path after the democratic transition from the late 80s and early 90s. And this is reflected in this format as well. And this is reflected in many other features and characteristics, such as the role of the automotive industry, the role of the automotive sector in these countries, since this sector, and when I'm saying automotive industry or automotive sector, that includes, of course, not only the electric vehicle segment, but the overall automotive industry constitutes a very important share, be it persons employed, share of production value in manufacturing total, or share of value added in manufacturing total, or share of export in total export. As you can see it in this table, this sector represents a very important part in these economies. This table is from 2020, and not because there is no more updated data set, but because I wanted to provide a snapshot of the situation that was typical for the years before Chinese electric vehicle companies or South Korean electric vehicle companies started to penetrate the European markets. And some of them did that through Central and Eastern Europe, Hungary in particular, but we will focus on this in a few minutes. So already in 2020, the V4 countries, of course, have recognized the challenges of the electric vehicle transition and have taken the first steps to adapt to that. Hungary and Poland, for instance, started to develop a very significant ability to produce batteries, and especially Hungary is progressing very well in this regard. And one of the reasons why it is progressing very well in this regard is the Chinese investment into this very sector. Chinese are aiming at investing in various countries in the European Union, but the majority of the countries in the EU have reservations with hosting Chinese investment, in particular in a strategic sector such as the automotive industry or such as the electric vehicle segment. But Hungary is extremely open towards Chinese investment in general, and in particular Chinese investment into this electric vehicle segment. This table again provides a snapshot of some selected Chinese FDI projects into the V4 automotive sector. It is from 2021, again, intentionally, because 2021 or 2022 signals the first waves of electric vehicle investments from China. So this shows you that there have been many investments already from China in the V4 region. There have been some in the automotive segment as well, but the majority of those projects have been focusing on the traditional automotive supply chain, so combustion engine vehicles or various spare parts related to that. But even in this regard, Hungary was among the most popular destinations. And the real shift occurred, as I've mentioned, after 2021, so starting with 2022. This table, again, shows you a snapshot. This is a relatively recent table, but even as we are sitting and talking here, there are new and more projects announced. So this list is far from being the final list of already announced Chinese battery-related or electric vehicle-related investments in Central and Eastern Europe. As you can see, the majority of the projects are related with battery investments. There are a few that is related with electric vehicle manufacturing, such as the recently announced investment of BYD in southern Hungary, or the last year announced project of Volvo that is owned by Geely in Slovakia. But the vast majority of those Chinese projects are related with either battery production itself or producing various battery components. And as you can see, some of them are very large in amount, for instance. And as you can also see, when you take a look on the location column, the majority of those investments are hosted or will be hosted by various Hungarian cities. Because of the already mentioned reason, Hungary is very open to these type of investments. I conducted lots of interviews, case study analysis of various companies that have invested in the region. Now I decided to just choose two of them because of various reasons, but I'm going to share the reasons with you as well. So basically, I was interested in the reason why these countries chose first the European Union, second the V4, and within that the particular country. So why does the V4 is the most popular destination for many of these companies, and why the respective individual country within that was chosen? What are the advantages and disadvantages for the V4 of receiving Chinese electric vehicle related investments? And of course, what are the main characteristics of Chinese presence in the electric vehicle segment in the V4? So CATL, as you could see it in the previous slide, is a recently announced investment. It's a very huge project. It is the biggest one in Europe, or it is going to be the biggest one because it is still under construction. But at least in their case, based on the interviews, the main aim was, of course, to penetrate the European markets, to be close to their customers, to their suppliers, especially German automotive producers. And again, if you think of the first table I showed you that showed the automotive sector heritage of the V4, the Visegrad 4 countries. The majority of those companies that have invested in these countries in the early 90s were coming mainly from Germany, some of them from France, and recently also from South Korea and many other countries. But they are here producing vehicles. Now they are producing electric vehicles, and for those electric vehicles, they of course need batteries. So that was a very natural step of CATL to target the Visegrad 4 and Hungary in particular, so as it can be closer to its main customers. This is the so-called agglomeration effect in economics. They also mentioned logistic and transport links with the rest of Europe, including, of course, in particular with those countries that hosts major automotive companies. They also mentioned the active role of the Hungarian state in attracting their investments. They especially refer to the Hungarian Investment Promotion Agency, which indeed put a lot of effort into attracting companies, and a lot of effort means financial efforts as well. As you can see on the slides, besides the traditionally good political relations, which often mentioned by Chinese companies as an explanation to why to locate in Hungarian cities, the amount of state support offered was also mentioned during the interviews. And in a minute, I'm going to show you a table and you will understand the reason why. I've also did some other research on the perception or the reception of these investments, because there is a division line, if you like, when it comes to whether the local population is happy or unhappy with the investments, when it comes to electric vehicle related investments. And it is very clear that they are relatively positive or at least neutral towards those investments that arrive into automotive manufacturing, vehicle manufacturing, for instance, or spare parts manufacturing. But the reception is very negative when it comes to battery production or anything that is related with battery production, for the very simple reason that they are afraid of the potential harmful consequences, that it can be harmful for the environment, it can pollute the waters, it can pollute the air, and so on and so forth. So this negative perception that is written here at the bottom of the slide under the CATL case is coming from mainly these type of concerns. NIO, on the other hand, is a different story. They are manufacturing battery swapping stations here in Hungary, near to Budapest, near to the capital city. And this is a relatively neutral activity because it doesn't have any polluting element, right? They mentioned many similar factors when I was asking about the reasons why they chose Hungary. They mentioned relatively cheap labor force, very friendly environment, which again brings back to this traditionally good political relations I have already mentioned with the CATL case, the favorable location and proximity to European markets and traditional consumers. And one very particular element is that CATL announced its investment into Hungary, and just a few months later, NIO also announced an investment into Hungary. And on the global level, CATL cooperates with NIO, so it was again a pull factor of their investment, but they also referred to the amount of state support. Here is the table I've already promised to show you. The state support granted to selected Chinese electric vehicle related investments in Hungary in euros. And as you can see, the CATL case is exceptionally huge. It is almost 1 billion euros state support for its relatively huge investment. So it shows the very clear intention of the Hungarian state, the Hungarian government, that they would really like to attract as much as possible of the competitive investments from China, so as they can become, and this is the Hungarian intention, one of the global hubs of electric vehicle battery manufacturing. Sorry, it was too quick on my side. So a few key takeaways when it comes to this research. First one is that it is absolutely visible that the Chinese companies would like to penetrate the European markets in order to optimize transaction cost, in order to avoid possible tariffs and various other trade barriers. So they set up European production centers, especially in countries that have extensive experience in automotive assembly, especially in countries where other car manufacturers are also present, and especially in countries where major European car manufacturers located nearby. So if you just add all those features, characteristics, the result is the V4, the Visegrad 4 region, especially because when it comes to labor costs, for instance, it is cheaper than, for instance, Germany. Chinese electric vehicle manufacturers also chose the V4 because of the good logistics and transportation links and the access to good supplier base, as I've mentioned with the CATL and the NIO cases. And even though if the majority of those projects I have just mentioned are in the announcement phase, or some of them are under implementation, so we are far from being finalized with all this, but at least a clear pattern is already emerging. The first one is most of the electric vehicle related investments has been concentrated in the battery segment, and Hungary is clearly the #1 location. As I've mentioned, the automotive industry is of utmost importance for the Visegrad 4 countries' economies, especially because local suppliers had the chance in the past to join in to those supply chains. But unfortunately, it seems that with the EV supply chain, it is going to be different for various reasons, because they don't yet have the expertise, and also because producing electric vehicles, producing electric batteries, is not necessarily that spare part intensive as in the case of internal combustion engines. So there will be less opportunity for these countries to join in. The presence of electric vehicle companies, especially the battery manufacturers, creates a number of additional challenges. I have already referred to some of them, pollution, for instance, but since lots of migrant workers are invited to the country so as they can work from working 24/7 for these companies, there is a fear that local workers may be displaced by the cheaper guest workers or migrant workers, as it is called in the Hungarian media. Another thing, that this is mainly manufacturing activity, again, as it has been throughout the 80s, the 90s, and the early 2000s, which doesn't really provide a catching up opportunity for the V4 countries. This is something that some of the V4 countries have already recognized, but in the case of Hungary, at least, it seems that they would rather stick with the traditional manufacturing activity. It seems that R&D activity is not typical for Chinese investment, so there won't be an opportunity for particular spillovers, technological spillovers. And this is the last slide about the future challenges that can be the results of Chinese presence in this market. So Europe, as we know, invests billions of euros in electromobility. It has its climate targets, which as of now doesn't seem achievable without Chinese companies' involvement. So even though if there are many concerns as regards Chinese companies' involvement into the electric vehicle segment in Europe, so far it seems that it is not possible without them. In order to achieve better conditions, at least reciprocal trade terms could be achieved. But for instance, different type of cooperation can help also to balance such situations. So for instance, there is a risk of vulnerability to the automotive industry on the V4's end, which can be, or which could be balanced with increasing local added value. And this added value could be achieved with, for instance, a more tied type of state aid or state support. As you could see, tons or millions of euros were provided by the Hungarian state to attract Chinese investments, but there were no specific terms, there were no specific additions or explanations on what these companies can spend the money. There could be some specific regulations on R&D cooperation or something that could ensure the involvement of local companies. So far, it is a non-existent feature of those type of agreements, but it could be in the future. And of course, an extensive information to the public is very much needed because otherwise people got really outrageous in those cities where various Chinese EV-related investments were announced. This is something we could already observe, but this could hopefully be solved with more information to the public. And here I stop because I'm already running out of time.
Well, thank you very much, Agnes. That was a very interesting presentation about something that we haven't really addressed directly in our research in Worlds of Lithium, and that we were very much looking forward to learn more. And it's very interesting and exciting to learn more about these Chinese investments expanding through Europe, which is already a very competitive market for automobility, and certainly is shaping a lot of things. So now we have to move to our last presentation by Dr. Konghui Wen, who will tell us the story of one of the most important battery producers. We already heard a little bit from CATL, but now we'll go to the origins. And this will allow us to put together some kind of puzzle about the different flows of electromobility resources and technologies. Hui Wen is Associate Professor of Regional Studies and Innovation at the University of Stavanger in Norway, and holds a PhD in Economic Geography from Kiel University in Germany. Her research focuses on the geographies of sustainability transitions, Sino-German industrial dynamics, regional foresight, and the geography of innovation, with a particular interest in the battery value chains in China and Europe. Hui Wen is currently examining the corporate and state strategies for building battery value chains in China and Europe under intensified geopolitical tensions, with a focus on the local, social, environmental, and economic impacts of such a global battery craze. Please, Hui Wen, the cyber floor is now yours.
Thanks a lot, Pablo, and thank you to Cristobal for the invitation. And also thank you to Juliana and Agnes for paving the road, because I think with all your presentation, it will be easier to understand my presentation. As Pablo already said, I will actually take you to China to see how CATL emerged in the Chinese context. Sorry, I have to, yeah. And also to understand, whether there's opportunity for other countries, as we see there's really a huge global enthusiasm for localizing the battery value chain in Europe, in the US, but also, for example, in Latin America. So my title, as we in Chinese we say, 3 ingredients of success is right timing, right place, and right people. And this is also the perspective I want to introduce you how, for example, CATL is or was successful in building up such a global value chain. So this presentation is based on my Mercury project on battery value chain construction in China and Germany. This is the part on China. And I published a series of papers with my co-authors, and today's presentation will be based on those papers. CATL, as already mentioned in the previous presentation, it's a very important actor. As we know it's the biggest battery producer worldwide today. And it was founded in 2011, so with only 30 years of history, that you can say that it's really very successful. And it's also not just a leader in production, as we always have this impression about Chinese companies, but also really a leader in R&D and also in global patenting activities. And this image shows is from the CATL's website, and you can see the global sort of R&D activities and production basis of CATL. Of course, it still has a strong concentration in China, but actually it's expanding more and more recently to Europe. Oh, that's just going to next slides automatically. Yeah, so basically it's really expanding and operating globally nowadays. And the headquarters is very surprisingly because it's not located in Shenzhen or Beijing or those metropolitan areas, but it's actually located in Ningde, which is also my hometown in Fujian province, which is sort of a province, sort of the peripheral city in coastal China, and it with 2.3 million population. This is really a small sort of city according to the Chinese standard. And before 2000, Ningde is seen as the economic lowland in the coastal China, and we have specialization on low added value activities like fishery, tea production, or like also some high polluted activities like steel manufacturing. And today we know that because of CATL, it's really the hub for EV battery, but also for other industries like EV manufacturing and recycling. You can see really there's a whole value chain being built up locally. And like I said, this is a very exceptional kind of location. And so how did that happen? So then I will walk you through these three elements. So in terms of right timing, we say 天时 in Chinese. So before CATL was founded in 2011, China was already the main producer of consumer electronic batteries. For example, ATL, which is the parent company of CATL, already was the largest battery producer back then. So they produce batteries for smartphones like Samsung or Apple. So they already had some know-how for battery production. And then after CATL was founded in 2011, they got this opportunity from the central government because the central government was promoting EV adoption nationwide. So with this white list policy being the most important policy, subsidizing mostly the Chinese actors, and of course CATL, and but also BYD benefit a lot from this policy. We discussed with this in depth in the paper with Thijs Hansen. If you're interested, you can look into the paper for details. And then from 2018 onwards, there was the time CATL went public. I think it's sorry. And at that time also we saw a global EV booming even during the COVID time, and this provide CATL an additional sort of expansion opportunity, which I think the timing is really important for the success of CATL and in general the success of the Chinese battery industry. And right place, we call it Dili in Chinese. And of course, even though Ningde is very small and a peripheral city in China, it's the hometown of two CATL's founders. So Robinson is the CEO. You will see that also in later slide, and also Siling Huang. So this kind of
We have technical difficulties with Hui Wen. Her internet seems to be collapsing. Let's see if she can come back up soon. And yeah, we just want to remind our audience that you can write your questions into the Q&A function on Zoom or on the comments in YouTube. And we are already taking note of them, and we'll raise them to our audience in the Q&A section. So feel free to write your questions.
that we take for granted and that are also working based on particular materials that we are seeing are coming from different parts of the world with different projects involved, political projects, but also like that are deeply framed or defined by languages of economy, and we are seeing how investments here are in a way a key concept, economic concept to understand one of the questions we are concerned with, which is the question about what is value in the value chain of lithium-ion batteries. So one of the questions that is emerging while we are waiting whether Hui-Wen can rejoin us is whether there are other languages, other possible languages to understand the role of China in the different places we are researching in Argentina or in Hungary or in that part of the European world. But I think that Hui-Wen is coming back, and
I'm really sorry.
No, we understand this can happen. Yeah. So the floor is yours again. Yeah.
Okay, great. Sorry about that, my connection. I just got kicked out again. Sorry about that. I will continue and try to finish as quickly as possible. Yeah, sorry, we talk about place. So and one part is about the Ningde because of the social capital and connections. Is this already there? And the second part is also the technology itself. Batteries, although it's a very high tech and a very complex industry where the industry architecture, product architecture, but also the process of producing battery is very complicated. But the unique point is that its research and production doesn't have to be located in metropolitan areas. And for example, for R&D, usually the in-house knowledge of those key companies is more important than the local innovation ecosystem. And this is very different, for example, from AI. And it's, for example, very difficult to imagine that OpenAI would, emerge somewhere in the peripheral region because you need this kind of innovation hub or like concentration of innovative companies, for example, in Silicon Valley. So this unique feature in combination with the production location, which is because battery manufacturing, it is a very sort of a typical manufacturing activity. So costs is very important. And because of these two elements, window of locational opportunity emerges for like non-core regions like Ningde. So this place really matters also for the success of both sides. And then right people is 人和 in Chinese. It's both CAT or those kind of battery producers and also local government need to have some kind of agency in order to make this kind of relationship works. And in our paper, we tease out 3 sort of dynamic capabilities that are important for this kind of strategic coupling. And so basically CAT brought its, I think, more than 30 suppliers to Ningde and also 1 automotive maker. So this is actually helpful for building up a local ecosystem. But the local government also responds very agilely to the needs of the industry. So this is also important to have right people doing the right thing. And of course, we also see a lot of enthusiasm from other parts of the world in building up local battery value chain, as we see also in Hungary or in Latin America. And this is a quote from Robinson in a TV interview. He said, all those countries, they are very enthusiastic about value chain and having more added value in their region. So he mentioned 3 types of regions: resource-rich countries, for example, like Latin America. They are pushing for the downstream segments to be established in the local regions, but also Europe, which is the main market. The expectation is also very clear you can access our market, but then you also have to produce locally and also expand the value chain across continental Europe. And China, of course, with a very strong dominant position in this value chain, they prefer to purchase raw materials from Latin American and all those resource-rich countries and manufacture batteries domestically, then export to, for example, Europe. So, and he mentioned these three parties, they cannot see agreement with each other. And then he said we could actually propose adopting this, 4-3-3 formation like we see in football team. We produce 30% battery in Latin America, 30% in Europe, and then the remaining 40% in China. So there's some kind of opportunity, I guess, also for non-Chinese regions. But what can we really learn from the Chinese, especially the Ningde case, which is a relatively humble and sort of a latecomer into the game? And I think these three elements still sort of holds when it comes to, the success ingredients. So right timing, I think this is applicable to all the three type of regions. We have this very general global booming EV demand, and also, strong demand for energy storage and right place. I mean, although Ningde is the hometown of these two founders, other regions, for example, Latin America, you have natural resources, or like if some places you have electricity that is generated by renewable energies, those are like advantages. Those regions can leverage on in order to have more value capture. And right people, I think you need to have this agency from the industry side, but also from the government side in order to make things work. But that's also, of course, not enough. And that's what doesn't travel, as Christopher asked in the very beginning, what does not travel so easily from Chinese context to the rest of the world. And I have 3 points to end this presentation. The first point is that China, especially Ningde, we don't have many activities. So this kind of social contestation or, the conflict of interest with the local community do not exist in, for example, the Ningde case. But in the very important issue to address. And I would argue that economic value capture is not everything. We need to really take into consideration community needs, but also the impact on the social and also ecological aspects of those battery-related activities. And related to that part, I ask myself always, is this kind of green industrial competition globally really the solution to our climate challenges? And especially if we think about the tensions created by this kind of global, green technology competition. And I think we really need to be very aware of from global south, north to the south, especially in those mining energy transition should not take place at the cost of certain group of people. I think that's a clear message where we are ethic about those kind of battery value chain. I think that's something we also need to think about the justice issue. And finally, come back to Pablo and Cristobal's question. I also want to ask what is really value and what is change in battery value chain, and how also can we connect this to my starting point of this right timing, right place, and people. So I think I will just leave this as a reflection for the Q&A. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much, Hui Wen. You left us with a difficult question there, with a difficult reflection to make. What a fantastic set of presentations. I can already see several points of encounter and discussion. Some things are rushing into my head. I see a very important role of the state in all the presentations. That certainly opens a lot of questions to the economists, but also for the anthropologists. We do not necessarily take the state as a unit of analysis for granted. And I really like how Hui Wen closed her presentation engaging with problems of justice and who pays the cost of the energy transitions. I hope that some of those questions will emerge in the discussion. So, of course, this is not about me, so we have to move to the questions and from our audience. And we remind you that you can keep writing your questions in the chat function on Zoom or as a comment in the streaming on YouTube. Now I pass the ball to Cristobal, who will raise the first concerns coming from our audience.
Thank you, Pablo, and thanks to all the marvelous speakers and wonderful presentations. We've been gathering different questions, and I will try to summarize or bring some of these questions together to propose general questions to all the three speakers. Yeah. So thank you to the different people, Nathalie Ralph, Limari Sase, Pablo Ampuero Ruiz was also raising some questions, David Tifo. I will try to summarize or to have some questions for everyone. That it has, and the main question here for me, and the way I'm trying to propose the different concerns I'm gathering from the audience is about investment and how the language of investments might be an economic language that hides or omits people on the one hand and territories, and on the other hand it can also entail a diversity of investment depending on the actors involved. So investment is not the same for when we speak about Chinese investments or when we speak about other kind of investment that are not Chinese. So the main question is how can we open up the languages of investments in order to take seriously the proverb also that Hu Wayne was bringing towards the end of her presentation. So to bring to the discussion, like the question about not the right people, but which kind of people, who are the people here in these investments, and which are the responses also to this investment from the different territories. That it was something that somehow Agnes was referring to when she mentioned environmental impacts and so on, but that we could expand a bit further. So how can we open up the term investment and Chinese investment when you think about, on the one hand, people that are being the subject of these investments, even if not in a direct way, and when we think about different kind of investment that do not involve necessarily Chinese investment, but also, for instance, the European community or different kind of like powers, economic powers that are not just China powers. So it's a general question for the three of you wonderful speakers.
Well, I can start if you don't mind, because I've already raised the issue of peoples involved. So in the case of the Hungarian case, at least people are involved in many cases. So for instance, those people affected by the investments themselves that are living in Debrecen and in various other cities are involved, but the government is using the narrative as well that jobs needs to be saved. And since internal combustion engines will be sooner or later out of the agenda, so there will be no need of producing automotive products that are related with internal combustion engines, jobs will be lost. So that is the reason why we should invite South Korean as well as Chinese companies to invest in Hungary so as they can save jobs. So on the other side of the narrative, we can see this saving the people's jobs narrative, and from the local people's narrative, we can see the save our farmland, which would be taken away for the investment, save the water, the air, as well as our jobs, because we are afraid of that is going to be taken away by guest workers that are eager to work from early in the morning till late in the evening. So at least this is how people are involved or affected in, for instance, the Hungarian case, the manufacturing case. And probably I should add something else on the other players, of the South Koreans as well. So this workshop was focusing on the Chinese players, but South Koreans are important players in this regard as well. And they have present with their investment in the Central and Eastern European region for quite some years. So Samsung or SK Battery is here in Hungary, for instance. And the majority of the concerns that are now raised as an issue in relation with the Chinese project is coming from the experience with the South Koreans. So there were many negative cases, there were many negative experience when it comes to environmental problems, water pollution issues, or even injuries within the factories with the South Korean companies. We don't even have an experience yet with the Chinese companies, yet we are afraid that the very same will happen. This is at least an interesting element.
Yeah, maybe I can also continue. From my perspective, increasingly, I think it's quite problematic to leave our all climate changes just to this kind of capitalist logic of investment, because inevitably, of course, it will solve quite a big part of our problem. But like I mentioned in my presentation, the costs and gains are highly unevenly distributed, and those who are not, disadvantaged, or whose voice do not matter in the sense that much, they will actually suffer most from those kind of green sort of, again, quote, sort of investment. So I think it's actually very important to think of maybe alternative investment mode where those stakeholders, local sort of people, community, their interests are being taken into account, and maybe sort of the state can step in or play a more important role to ensure all those sort of investment in green field is also can achieve at this certain level of social justice. And I think that's also usually not in discussion, because when we talk about green transition or all those investments, I mean, I'm just thinking, how can actually the government balance all those? I mean, on the one hand, the concern on really having a competitive industry in their region, in their territory, and on the other hand, to ensure that the costs are not really sort of at the shoulder of all those vulnerable groups. I think this is maybe room also for exploration of other ways of investment.
Maybe I can add some words or thoughts regarding some of the points that Cristobal mentioned regarding if Chinese companies are different from others. For example, in Argentina, Chinese mining companies operate like more or less the same than other mining companies. Chinese labor and extractive practices are not like significantly like different from those of Western or other investors, but China's approach of relying on home countries' regulations for social and environmental protection, for example, makes strong policies even more crucial. And I'm maybe now I can focus in the case of Argentina, for example. There are like additional challenges for states in Latin America, such as my country, Argentina, to design and deploy robust policies in the face of exponential growth in the demand of transition materials such as lithium. And regarding what just Haiwen and also Agnes mentioned, there's like on the one side, like local governments and also like the national government mentioning that mining activities are really important to local workers, so they can like raise amount of jobs. But also we have in the case of Caucharios La Olaroz, where CanFen is part of this project or this plant. The area is home of 6 indigenous communities, for example, in the that are part of the Atacama ethnic group. and most of them they oppose to lithium extraction. They have mentioned that they have been forced to move due to shortages of potable water, for example. They have mentioned that construction works have affected the water supply, animals, plants, and that the companies involved in the project have not complied with the environmental assessment. So there's a lot of talk in maybe in the local communities and also in NGOs in Argentina regarding how are we going to deal with the lithium extraction, because it's a huge topic because there are a lot of companies, not only Chinese, but from South Korea, from Japan, from now Irish, also from Australia, from Canada. So this is not like just an issue of Chinese companies, but in this project that I'm mentioning, there have been like some agreements with the impacted communities, but there's a lot to do regarding SSG standards and SSG governance, and this is something that maybe the Argentinian government has to deal with more, maybe more attention.
Well, I want to jump right there into the next round of questions, because so one of the things that we're trying to think here is this idea of the value chain and how what is chain and what is value, right? So we just had a question about investments and that part of the economy, and I want to move a little bit more to the figure of the chain. And if we take the idea of the chain as this series of interconnected links, and in the language of economy, this tends to be very flat, where this interconnected links seems to be just the flow of capital and resources from one place to the other. Sometimes even, and I've been part of a lot of industry discussions where there seems to be almost the context, the state, the social context seems to be kind of background information to something that is happening almost independently from it. And so I want to insist on that idea of complicating these problems of the link by focusing on each of those links. And I see a tension that is coming from the presentations between state and society here a little bit. So I'm going to take David Tiffel's question from the audience, who is going to be presenting next week as well, about, for example, the communication that exists between, he asks about Hungarian state and the public sphere regarding Chinese investments and the presence of Chinese corporations, where, for example, maybe public consultation might not be used in that particular political context to, for example, evaluate the presence of these investments. What could happen in the case of popular rejection of Chinese investments in Hungary, for example? I would like to extend that question and move it, for example, also to Argentina, where investments in lithium also create a lot of problems with civil society actors, indigenous populations. And we know that Argentina is a very mobilized society, politically very active. So what dimension is happening, what dynamics are happening there in terms of the evolution of Chinese investments with respect to civil society responses to that? And I think there is also something interesting to say here about China, because the development of electromobility in China also has this kind of resistances to some extent. We know it's a very popular technology. But for example, if we want to think about end of life of lithium batteries, there is a tension between, for example, formal recycling efforts and informal workshops, informal recycling efforts happening that also create a tension in terms of that particular part of the chain, of that link of the chain between different economic practices that are happening either at the corporate level or economic practices that are kind of a social entrepreneurship. And maybe learning a little bit about these tensions can also tell us about how electromobility is moving forward around the world. So I present you I know it's a complicated reflection here, but it will give you some space to talk a little more about the tensions in each of the contexts that you have worked.
Shall I start, because you've mentioned the Hungarian
case
first?
Yeah.
So the Hungarian case is relatively special in this regard, because in the previous years, although we have received lots of Chinese investments, but not necessarily in segments such as the electric vehicle segment, the electric battery segment that is more considered as problematic or polluting or whatever. So basically the government is not really used to communicating about these projects. So they usually present these as a very good opportunity for the Hungarian economy to catch up. And usually an investment of the company Huawei or the investment of the chemical company Wanhua has been a relatively neutral case from local people's perspective. This is the first ever case, although we are receiving investments from China for at least 2 decades now. But this electric battery related investment seems to be the first case ever in Hungary that really something that people can feel on their own skin. So this is the first ever case when people in Hungary, at least in the past 2 decades or 3 decades, are protesting against Chinese investments. And this protest is often blaming the Chinese side for bringing pollution to Hungary, although the whole strategy has been that of the Hungarian government, the strategy of becoming a manufacturing hub for electric batteries is not coming from China, but coming from the Hungarian government. But this is the first ever case when there are protests against Chinese investment, and this creates, of course, a new situation.
Thank you very much, Agnes. Yes, please, Juliana. Yeah.
In Argentina, there's like a tension. The exploitation and production of lithium being considered like a strategic resource in comparison, for example, to Bolivia and Chile, where it's a strategic resource. In Argentina, the regulation of lithium exploration, the extraction and processing activities are included within a general mining regulatory framework that is based on 3 regulations, mainly the National Constitution, the Article 124, the Mining Code, and the Mining Investments Law. The framework is the point of view in the regulatory framework, and what the government, just not the national government, but also the local governments are mainly, this is based in a liberal nature. I mean, the assumption being like this, the framework is a lot of, is based on the idea that a lot of investment is needed, and the way to attract investment is by giving stability to foreign companies. So they give a lot of benefits to the provinces, which are the owners of the resources, and cannot charge royalties of more than 3%. And this is, of course, something that is a way like really distant to what is happening in the local communities, and what we can say regarding there are like 2 ways of seeing like the way of understanding the lithium extraction in Argentina. There's like a way, or there are some people, maybe local governments and also national governments and companies, of course, we can summarize saying like the productive development of the issue, and there are like also ambient people that come from the local communities and also indigenous communities, and of course NGOs saying that this is something that has to be more strictly discussed, and we don't have to forget about, for example, the use of water, the use of the pollution of the local water, but also the no access to a resource that is not renewable, such as water, but also the local ecosystems, and also the So there's like a tension that we can say regarding the case of Argentina, that is, there's a vision from the local and also the national government, but mainly the provinces or local governments, like having like lithium as a main activity of and trying to attract investments from foreign companies mainly, and then you have like the social component of this issue that is more maybe highlighted from, as I said, NGOs and also local communities, and these are the voices that I can say are not being heard, and so, well, just that.
Yeah, in the Chinese context, I would like to come back to Pablo's like this figure of value chain, because oftentimes when we hear about battery value chain, we start with mining and then sort of processing and then to sell and pack production and then to reuse and recycling, and as if there's a closed loop. But reality is that this loop has never been closed, because, I mean, especially when it comes to recycling and reuse, even the highest recycling rate, let's say 90%, that's still 10%. That is not sort of being closed. That is one issue. I think we would really need to think about this kind of terminology. And another thing is that those kind of value chain thinking oftentimes overlooks tensions of things that probably is also quite important. I mean, in the Chinese case, when it comes to the end of life of batteries, the official document and also all those policies, they want to formalize this part of the value chain, so to say, and in the sense that they see big actors, like state-owned enterprises or like national champions like CATL and many other big companies, and now they also want to have this kind of big players in the recycling part, because now recycling will become more and more sort of lucrative. But the reality is actually most of this recycling and activities are done by informal recyclers. They collect and recycle almost 80% of all the spent batteries in China. So, and I think when we think about formalization of those battery value chain and spend a lot of national resources in order to gain competitive advantages in the whole value chain, this kind of informal sort of workers and their contribution to really recycle the part of the materials in the battery, I think really needs to be taken more seriously. In this regard, I think probably an alternative concept to this value chain thinking is to think about also the human economy, like people behind those kind of activities, instead of taking the value chain as it is and as the face value, I would say.
Talking like a true anthropologist, Hui-Wen.
Yeah, and an anthropological emerging reflection would be to take seriously the idea of skin. Also, that Agnes was mentioning here, that investments in her case are for the first time being felt on the skin. No, and if we think about the pictures also that Juliana shared with us about these salt pumps in South America and Argentina, we also can think about the skin of the earth, but also we have the skin of the people. And we have the very idea of investment that is mostly shared in terms of economic investments that sometimes omits these skins. And what is interesting for me now is here how this conversation is opening up, like the ideas of investment through this articulation of different skins, like that is more like the texture of people involved in these transitions that we aim at being thinking of, like at least like trying to contribute in terms of making them just transitions, right? So probably one of the aspects that is emerging here is like the need to opening up the languages in which we speak about these investments and bringing in complexity into these reflections. And I'm, of course, starting to close the webinar, unfortunately, because of time constraints. But this is one of the ideas that is emerging here And Pablo, what do you
Yeah,
think?
I think that there is another very interesting aspect, or a big idea that I'm left with today, is that the electric vehicle is not just an electric vehicle. It's not just a technology for mobility, but it's also a land of contestation, like a field of geopolitical, geoeconomic contestation. And that's what we are really seeing here. Like through the following the battery, we can see different ideas of relation to the environment, but also relations to the economy, relations to the market. And in that sense, one of the things that I'm very fascinated these days is about how much of the state is needed to create the market of electromobility and to create that industry, especially now that we're seeing 100% of tariffs on imports for Chinese imports of electric vehicles in China, increasing of electric vehicles from China into Europe, then the US, and so on. I think that there is a very strong narrative there where sort of the electric vehicle is kind of a bellwether of what is happening in the world these days. You see a lot of very strong contestation and competition between Europe and the US, but then you find developing countries in South America or in Eastern Europe as well that are very happy to receive those investments because it creates a lot of political capital, and not necessarily, economic capital, or political capital in this case. Bringing those investments creates jobs, and creating jobs, one way or another creates a political narrative that can keep you in government. And certainly in Latin America, which is not where I do research, but it's where I was born and where I lived for many years, then a very strong narrative about development and using Chinese money for some kind of industrialization, I think is bringing us closer to the type of discussion that Agnes was telling us about in the V4, about how Chinese money can bring certain level of independence or development or industrialization and money, right? Which is in a way or another kind of one of those ideas that China had in its development model of making joint ventures, capturing technology, capturing capital, capturing know-how, and so on. So it's really so interesting that all of these dynamics can be seen just through this electric vehicle that is parked everywhere now on the streets and so on, and it's really reshaping a lot of the understandings. We're left with some questions that we cannot address, sadly, but that maybe can re-emerge in our next session. There are a lot of questions about how recycling is going to reshape the lithium battery chain that escapes a little bit from today, but hopefully we can address them in another instance. I give it back to Cristobal so we can close this session for today.
Yes, well, thanks again to all the three wonderful speakers today. We are really grateful for bringing in more levels of complexity that can complicate how we think these different knots within this idea of the battery value chain of the lithium-ion battery, or any kind of technology we have in mind when we think in terms of Chinese investments in the era of the ecological Chinese civilization, in a way. So thank you again, and thanks to the European Research Council, who is funding our research, and to ICLAC, the Millenium Nucleus on the impacts of China in Latin America and the Caribbean, who is contributing and organizing this activity with us, and to the University of Amsterdam, our host institution. So we look forward to welcoming you all to our next webinar, scheduled for June 7th, where we will delve into the drivers of electromobility in Chinese walls. So looking forward to see you all again, and thank you again to our wonderful speakers today. Till next time.